Amazing act of trust. He left a safe open to test his maid. What she revealed will stun you. Jake stared at the antique safe tucked in the corner of his dimly lit den, its formidable exterior gleaming with untold secrets. The air felt heavy around him, and the hollow echo of loss settled in his chest, a constant reminder of his father's absence. The modest home inherited felt like a weight on his shoulders rather than a cherished inheritance. Ever since his dad passed, nothing felt right. His success as a real estate agent here in Columbus, Ohio, painted a picture of prosperity, yet the nagging doubt festered within him. Wealth breeds distrust. He couldn't shake the feeling that the expansive $300,000 sales he had closed lately had diminished his relationships. Rosa, his ever-faithful maid, had been a fixture in his life long before his wealth skyrocketed. She was an immigrant with a heart of gold, sacrificing so much for her family back in Mexico. The bond they formed was tender, yet fraught with the tension of their differing statuses. As he left the safe ajar, a chill ran down his spine. Was this a cruel test or a desperate attempt to reassure his paranoid mind? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the weekend unfolded, Jake's mind raced with hopeless scenarios. He observed Rosa from the shadows of the living room, her movements confident, efficient. Would she take the bait? Could the trust he fought so hard to maintain withstand this test? His stomach twisted at the thought of betrayal. How could he confront her, knowing his insecurities could threaten the bond they built over years? The quiet sounds of suburbia seeped through the windows, an ordinary backdrop to his extraordinary dilemma. He glanced at her, watching her commit to her tasks with diligence. Tension coiled around Jake like a serpent. With each passing hour, his confidence in his actions wavered. Memories of shared laughter echoed in his mind, moments that now felt tainted by doubt. He plastered on a fake smile to mask the growing anguish within. What if Rosa discovered the open safe and took advantage of it? The mere thought ignited a flame of panic in his gut, filling her with dread that strained her relationship with her. But equally consuming was the fear of losing the very foundation he'd rebuilt himself on. This home, this sense of family, this connection. The afternoon drifted to a close, shadows lengthening as night approached. Jake could feel the walls closing in. When the door swung open and Rosa emerged from the kitchen bearing a plate of cookies, he hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. The moment she stepped closer, her eyes held a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "Jake, I saw the safe." He held his breath, the air still between them. An oppressive silence enveloped the room, and the tension reached a boiling point where vulnerability flickered beneath the surface. Now, Jake stood on the precipice of a truth he may not be ready to face, a question weighing heavily in his mind. What have I done? The chasm between them widened, each trapped in their own thoughts, anxieties spiraling out of control. Would he validate his fears or willfully blind himself to the trust their bond had nurtured? With every second that passed, it felt as if the walls were closing around them both, and the fragile threads that tethered their lives together hung in powerful suspense. Jake's heart thrummed loudly in his chest, words swirling in his throat like a tempest waiting to burst. Rosa's expression flickered with uncertainty, her innocence a stark contrast to the deception he had conjured. He could see the questions clouding her eyes, each more damning than the last. Could he confess his motives and salvage their relationship, or would the shame of his distrust forever alter their dynamic? "Rosa," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The warmth of his earlier patronizing demeanor felt foreign now. He was exposed and raw. "I didn't think." "Didn't think what?" she interrupted, the steel in her voice surprising him. "That I might betray you after all this time?" The weight of her accusation sat heavy on Jake's shoulders. It pierced through his preconceived notions, overthrowing the facade of control he desperately clung to. How could he elucidate the tumult raging inside him? Failure to grasp that he was acting out of fear rather than reason twisted his insides. The colorful plate of cookies trembled as Rosa set it down, her frustration palpable. He could sense her hurt. It manifested not just in her words, but in the way she straightened her posture, assuming a defensive stance. "You think so little of me?" He fought against the rising tide of guilt threatening to swallow him whole. "No, that's not... It was a test, yes, but I was trying to protect myself. Ever since... everything, since Dad." His voice trailed off as vulnerability pricked at his resolve. She crossed her arms, and the silence grew thick, laden with the weight of unspoken truths. Jake felt the sting of tears behind his eyes, fighting to maintain composure. The idea of Rosa, bound by circumstances and forced into silence about her feelings, paralleled his own battles, though his were cloaked in money and masked under the guise of success. They were both navigating a minefield of expectations, trapped by assumptions that weighed heavily upon their backs. "Your wealth, Jake. It's a nice facade, but it's eroding what we've built," Rosa said, her voice softer now, yet still threaded with urgency. A shudder rippled through him. Her words struck home, slicing through the illusion he had spun around his life. Wealth had shielded him from so many things: heartbreak, disappointment, confusion. Yet it had also ensnared him in a web of distrust that endangered every connection he held dear. "I don't want that. I never wanted. I just wanted what we had before," he admitted, desperation spilling into his tone. The realization loomed brightly before him. His wealth might have clouded his judgment, but it never defined his worth or values. "You need to learn to trust, not just with me, but yourself," she replied, an undercurrent of compassion threading through her words. It struck him as an unexpected revelation, an insight into the depths of his own inadequacies. Could he navigate this personal upheaval? The realization that he needed to reevaluate his coping mechanisms dawned on him. Rosa had the courage to confront him, to call out the unspoken fears that festered beneath the surface. Could he do the same for himself? Suddenly, a shift occurred within him. A seed of determination germinated, growing stronger. What if he leaned into the depths of his vulnerability, instead of recoiling? The road would be fraught with challenges, more revelations about who he was beyond the facade of success. As he opened his mouth to speak again, the door creaked and closed behind him. The sound echoed ominously. Who could it be? Rosa's expression shifted again, her focus moving past him toward the door as a familiar voice broke the charged air. "Jake!" It was his older brother, Aaron, their estranged relationship hanging heavily in the air like a thundercloud, ready to release a storm. For Jake, the moment crystallized in his mind. Could he manage to face this uninvited tension, or would it unravel everything he had begun to piece back together? Jake froze as the familiar voice sliced through the tension enveloping the room. Aaron stood there, a figure from his past, charged with nostalgia and resentment. The accusation laden in Rosa's words echoed in his mind, intertwining with the uninvited complexity of Aaron's presence. "Hey," he responded, keeping his tone casual, though his insides twisted with conflicting emotions. This was not the time for confrontation, but also, could it ever be? His vulnerability felt exposed already, the dialogue with Rosa having peeled back layers he wished to keep wrapped securely. Aaron's gaze flickered between Jake and Rosa, A curious blend of confusion and annoyance etched across his face. "What's going on?" he demanded, his tone carrying the weight of their unresolved issues. The rift had grown not just from time and distance, but the very essence of what family meant to each of them. "Nothing," Jake began, the instinct to protect Rosa surging within him. But what exactly was he protecting?
The image of the poised man he had crafted? Or the fragile trust which, like gossamer, could part at any moment? "Nothing?" Aaron scoffed, stepping further into the room. "You're going to pretend this is just casual? I don't think so." Rosa's presence faded momentarily as Jake's focus shifted to his brother. Memories swirled like autumn leaves, vibrant reminders of childhood mischief and eventual estrangement. The betrayal Jake felt when their paths diverged, cornered by ambition and misunderstanding, reshaped him into someone he hardly recognized. But the sting of their past did not settle neatly in his heart. Instead, it branched into anxiety. Fearful glances exchanged with Rosa, and the knowledge that part of him was still enmeshed in a facade even now. Aaron's piercing stares were more acutely painful. "Why do you always have to assume the worst?" Jake challenged, his voice gaining in volume, unintentionally slicing through the roiling atmosphere. "You've always been good at that, too," Aaron replied, the bitterness hanging in the air. "You think you can buy people's loyalty, Jake, but you can't. Look where that's gotten you." Another jab from his brother, each remark like a dagger aimed at his carefully built defenses. In the past, he would have deflected. He would have smirked and brushed Aaron off, cloaking his emotions with arrogance. But he felt something shift at that moment, as if the barriers he'd locked behind were beginning to wear thin. "Maybe you're right," Jake admitted, surprising even himself. The admission felt raw but liberating. What better way to approach this moment than to confront his inability to trust, both in others and himself? "What do you mean, maybe? This is about you, not me," Aaron shot back, his frustration palpable. "No, it is about you. Your warnings are valid, but you don't understand what." Jake's voice faltered, caught in the crossfire of his emotions. How incredibly isolating this world can be when everyone around you is willing to play their part for a paycheck. Rosa's expression softened, the tension between them still there, but momentarily shifting as she caught the glimpse of vulnerability in Jake's acknowledgement. This could be an opening, a chance to seek clarity in both his relationship with Rosa and his estranged brother. "If you're open to it," she said gently, "this is a good time to heal." Healing. The word resided in his mind, a thorny branch with the potential to bloom if only he would risk the fall. "Why did you even come here, Aaron?" Jake pressed, seeking answers that felt long overdue. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stop pretending, to unveil yourself instead of hiding behind cash and power. That's the brother I miss," Aaron shot back, their long-standing connection hanging by a thread. Was seeking the truth of his identity now the key to unraveling the binds of distrust? The realization dawned on Jake that the challenge would not just be confronting Aaron, but also penetrating the depths of his own psyche. Each moment of clarity would require an embrace of his vulnerability, the very thing he had fought so hard against. As the air brimmed with truth, Jake felt an unsteady resolve forming within. But before he could articulate this newfound determination, a sharp knock echoed through the room, extinguishing the opportunity for clarity with a sudden, severing force. "Who is it now?" Rosa asked, her eyes widening as Jake's heartbeat quickened. He could feel the fateful cogs of his life shifting again, a shift that could propel him into unforeseen revelations or plunge him deeper into chaos. With a shared breath of uncertainty, Jake moved toward the door, but each step felt heavy, anchored by the battles that still lay ahead. Would this intrusion be another test,
or a lifeline? Jake hesitated at the door, the sharpness of the knock reverberating through his core. He felt apprehensive, not just about who stood on the other side, but what his decision to open the door might symbolize. It was an active choice to confront whatever lay ahead, both in his external world and within himself. With a deep breath, he turned the knob, the wood creaking as he pushed it open. There, framed in the dim light of the hallway, stood a young woman clutching a package, a stranger whose mere existence felt like a catalyst in his life, though he couldn't yet comprehend why. "Delivery for Jake Thompson," she announced, her voice steady yet slightly hesitant as her gaze traced him, perhaps aware of the charged atmosphere behind him. "Thanks," Jake managed, feeling oddly exposed, as if this mundane encounter was a reminder that his personal turmoil had not yet become public spectacle. It felt surreal, standing there with the weight of unresolved conflict at the forefront of his mind, while the outside world continued to spin on its axis. As he took the package, the young woman's gaze caught Rosa's. Their eyes briefly met, and in that flicker, an unspoken camaraderie appeared. Two people momentarily entangled in Jake's drama, each assessing the implications of a man grappling with his own identity. Jake closed the door and turned back toward the living space, the package now an unremarkable element amidst a storm of emotions. What lay inside? It was just a delivery, but everything felt charged, potentially explosive. He could sense Rosa and Aaron watch him, both scrutinizing but also waiting for his next move, as if they each sought resolution and further complicity in his development. Setting the package on a table, Jake hesitated again, feeling the weight of his choices lay heavy on his shoulders. This wasn't just about confronting Aaron or repairing his relationship with Rosa.
It was about standing in front of the man he had created, acknowledging the longing for a deeper connection that had been buried under layers of ambition and defense mechanisms. "Open it," Rosa urged softly, breaking the silence. Her voice echoed the nudging of his own mind, prompting him forward into uncharted territory. Jake lifted the box's flaps, not knowing what to expect. Inside lay an assortment of old photographs and mementos from his childhood, many he had long forgotten. There were snapshots of Aaron's crooked grin, images of family gatherings with laughter frozen in time, and even a crumpled receipt from a restaurant they had visited as kids tucked amidst the memories. For a moment, the past overwhelmed him with nostalgia, raw and visceral. Each image bore witness to the bond that had once existed, overshadowed now by years of silence. But the more he stared, the more he felt a shift within. A truth echoed in the chaos of his heart. These memories could be bridges over the chasm created by years of hurt. "Those are your roots, Jake," Aaron finally spoke, his voice softer, a surprising gentleness replacing the earlier sharpness. "You can choose to build from them or bury them deeper." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. It was a challenge, one that forced Jake to confront not only his past, but also the potential for healing. There was power in this choice, the realization that he could be active in his own healing, rather than subject to these familial rifts. Taking a steadying breath, Jake turned to face his brother, not just a rival from his past, but part of a collective history woven strongly enough to potentially mend their relationship. "Perhaps it's time to find a way back," he said, the words flowing from somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope igniting in the midst of chaos. But as the tension stirred, Jake couldn't ignore the nagging realization that the road to reconciliation was fraught with uncertainty. There were layers to peel back, and the journey would demand more than just an agreement. Honesty and vulnerability were essential. Before they could dive deeper into that exploration, another knock echoed through the space, this time sharper, demanding, relentless in its intrusiveness. Jake exchanged a glance with Rosa, her eyes widening, echoing the fear that twisted through him once more. "What now?" he whispered, torn between curiosity and dread. Could he truly handle another upheaval? Could every step forward lead him towards something resembling peace, or would he fall deeper into chaos? With a knot forming in his stomach, he took a step towards the door, knowing that with each turn of the handle, he was about to expose every fragile layer of himself once more. The real question lingered in the air. Was he ready for what waited beyond? Jake felt his heart race in rhythm with the insistence of the knock. A bead of sweat trickled down the nape of his neck, not just from the anticipation of the unknown visitor, but from the dawning realization of how crucial this moment was. The package lay open on the table, a portal to his past, yet his present was about to be confronted in a way he hadn't anticipated. Rosa's presence next to him served as a reminder that he wasn't alone, but she too watched him with fluttering uncertainty. The air seemed thick with tension as he reached for the doorknob, knowing that this was not merely a physical threshold, but an emotional one, crossing into a space where revelations awaited. He swung the door open to reveal a familiar face, a neighbor, Martha, her brow creased with concern. "Jake, I came to see if you're all right. There's been some commotion at the Johnsons' place, and—" Her voice trailed off, gauging the atmosphere inside. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, trying to inject calmness into his tone. But deep down, he could feel that the facade was crumbling. This wasn't just about a friendly visit. It felt like an interruption that demanded him to reflect. Martha's gaze moved past him, recognizing Rosa and Aaron sitting at the table, their expressions caught between apprehension and a hint of relief. "I didn't mean to barge in," she said, momentarily flustered, "but I had a feeling you might need someone to listen." Her words lingered in the air, tinged with an offering of support. This was uncharted territory. He could either close the door and retreat back into his shell, or stand at the threshold of vulnerability, willing to engage with the insinuation that perhaps opening up could facilitate understanding. Actually, Jake hesitated, weighing his options. The internal dialogue wrestled with the possibility that sharing his turmoil could lead to something more than isolation. "I could use that. Come in." As she stepped over the threshold, Jake silently acknowledged the choice he had just made. It was a small step, but felt monumental, a move from isolation toward connection. He could sense the weight of unspoken expectations settling amongst them. The burden of his family's discontent swirled alongside the new presence, testing whether vulnerability could foster collective healing. Martha settled into the chair across from him, her approachable demeanor prompting Jake to open the floodgates of honesty. "There's been a lot going on," he began. The words felt foreign, yet liberating, his innermost thoughts finally slipping toward articulation. "I found these," he gestured toward the scattered photographs, transformed from mere nostalgia into tangible reminders of his fractured family dynamics. "I'm trying to sort out what they mean to me, but the weight of it all—" Martha leaned forward, encouraging him with her attentive presence. "It sounds like a reckoning," she replied softly. "Those memories, they serve a purpose, but you need to determine what that purpose is for you." Jake's heart quickened with every exchange. This wasn't merely a conversation, it was a lifeline. He began to untangle the threads of his past as Aaron listened quietly, perhaps resonating with his own struggles reflected in Jake's words. There was an implicit acknowledgement that they both stood at the precipice of change. His brother's eyes flicked from Jake to Martha, the tension in Aaron's jaw signaling the brewing conflict beneath the surface. "What's the purpose of dredging up all that old stuff?" Aaron challenged. "Can't it just stay buried?" The question struck, forcing Jake to confront not just the past, but the defensive barriers he had relied on for so long. "If I ignore it, I can't grow," Jake replied, the determination solidifying within his voice. "Understanding where I've been helps me decide where I'm headed." The room thickened with the weight of that resolve, mirroring Jake's own internal struggle between fear and aspiration. The reckoning had begun, but as he glanced at Martha, he felt a mix of gratitude and vulnerability.
Would he prove strong enough to face the contradictions within himself, or would the path lead him to further anguish? With a palpable electric tension transforming the air, their focus shifted, lingering on Jake's unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. And as he took a deep breath, the question expanded. What new discoveries awaited him as he ventured further into the remnants of his past? The answers, he sensed, were shrouded within fragments of grief and hope waiting to be unveiled. Martha's steady gaze seemed to pierce through Jake's defenses, coaxing out emotions he had long buried. Her encouragement felt like a catalyst, stirring within him the tumult of his unresolved feelings. Each shared word transformed doubt into potential, igniting a desire to confront the uncomfortable truths that led to the division in his family. What if those memories are a burden too heavy to bear? Aaron's voice cracked, with a tension that hung thick in the air. His brother's skepticism echoed Jake's internal turbulence. Could these explorations of the past really lead to healing, or would they simply dredge up more pain? It was a delicate balance, laden with implications for both of them. Jake's brow furrowed as he weighed the impact of their past experiences on his current identity. It's not about bearing the burden alone, he countered, feeling a flicker of resolve beneath the initial fear. It's about finding the strength to share it, to reshape it. Martha nodded, her understanding manifesting in her soft smile. You're redefining your connection with these memories. It's not about dismissing the pain, it's about integrating it into who you are now. That notion resonated with Jake. He wasn't merely revisiting old wounds, he was actively transforming them into insights, into something that could illuminate his path forward. As the conversation unfolded, Jake found himself revisiting particular moments captured within those photos, each one a frozen tableau of a family somewhat familiar yet wholly distant. The smiles were tinged with a hollow familiarity, evoking bittersweet feelings he had long since preferred to ignore. Each image seemed to beckon him to acknowledge parts of himself he had tried to suppress, making room for understanding rather than resentment. "There's no escaping where you come from, is there?" Martha offered gently, as if simply voicing the truth could break the chains of denial. "No, there isn't," Jake admitted, nodding slowly, "but learning to accept that could change the way I see everything moving forward." A revelation washed over him, propelling him to redefine his relationship with both his past and present in a manner that could finally allow for growth. Yet beneath these realizations lingered a shadow of anger rooted in the past, a perpetual ache fueled by lack of closure. It simmered quietly, waiting for an opportunity to bubble over. Would facing it head-on jeopardize the efforts he had already put forth, or might it empower him to cultivate deeper connections with both Aaron and Rosa? Aaron shifted in his chair, his discomfort evident. What if this just leads to more fighting, more pain? The skepticism in his eyes was plain, challenging Jake to prove his determination against not just doubts, but also the familial ties that had restrained them all. "Perhaps we need to break the cycle," Jake proposed tentatively. "What if we use the hurt as a springboard rather than a wall?" He felt the weight of both Martha's and Aaron's silent scrutiny as he voiced this proposal, a moment of vulnerability magnifying the intensity in the room. The potential for confrontation loomed like a dark cloud, stirring fear but also a burgeoning sense of authenticity. "I don't want to fight," Aaron replied quietly, the underlying hurt in his voice undeniable. "Neither do I," Jake responded, internally grappling with the fear of inserting unresolved wounds back into their relationship. "But if we're going to heal, we must be willing to face whatever comes next together." As the air thickened with tension, Jake sensed a collective heartbeat reverberating through their shared uncertainty. This was a crucial pivot point, a moment that could either manifest real change or deepen the rift that had haunted them for far too long. In his chest, a rhythm echoed against the silence, charging the atmosphere with unspoken potential. The conversation had merely begun to scratch the surface. What deeper truths awaited them in this vulnerable exploration of shared history and unspoken grievances? Would the confrontation fortify their bond or unravel it entirely? The stakes now lay heavily in the air, and as Jake glanced between Martha and Aaron, he felt the tremors of shifting ground beneath them all. The time had come to face something far more daunting than mere photographs, the reckoning with each other and, ultimately, with himself. Jake inhaled deeply, the air thick with unsaid words and the weight of intertwined histories. Even with Martha's encouraging presence, uncertainty still unfurled, stretching taut within him. The prospect of exposing old wounds was daunting, yet he also recognized a flicker of clarity. Confronting pain might be the only way to liberate himself, and perhaps Aaron, from their shared past. "Let's start with something simple," Jake prompted, his voice steadier than he felt. "What's a moment in our childhood that stands out for you, Aaron? Something that makes you feel like we were still connected?" Aaron's brow furrowed as he considered the question. After a moment, he answered, "The summer when we built that treehouse. We thought we would get rich charging the neighborhood kids to play in it." A hint of nostalgia danced in his eyes, yet it was tainted with the undercurrent of loss. "That was a good summer," Jake replied, his mind drifting back to the late afternoons spent clambering over branches, the scent of freshly cut wood and laughter filling the air. "We were happy then." "Yeah," Aaron replied softly, the smile fading as reality encroached. "Things changed after that. We were just kids playing pretend. I don't think we ever got back to that." Jake could feel Aaron's hesitation, a barrier of hurt disguised as acceptance hanging between them. What if we could redefine the narrative? What if we turned our pain into something constructive? The idea bore weight as he spoke it aloud. The treehouse now felt like a symbol, not just of joy, but of the distance that had grown between them. "I guess it's worth a shot," Aaron concurred, but the caution in his tone signified his wariness of where this path might lead. Jake turned to Martha. "What do you think? Can memories like that help us heal?" "Memories may be a double-edged sword," she responded thoughtfully, "but if you acknowledge them together, they can transform the hurt into a unique bonding experience. It's not about erasing the past, it's about making space for growth." The notion lodged itself in Jake's heart, weaving between hope and trepidation. Knowing they had to face this darkness collectively felt unnervingly liberating, but it also stirred doubt about whether each of them was ready for that level of openness. "Maybe there's something else we should talk about. The fight that shattered us. The day we lost everything," Jake suggested, his pulse quickening at the thought. He sensed that this was the pivotal moment, the one that could either fortify their resolve or unravel them further. "What good will it do?" Aaron shot back, defensiveness clouding his clarity. "Going back there, it just adds more fuel to the fire." Jake's heart sank momentarily. Yet he projected conviction, anchoring himself with the intention to confront, not confrontationally, but to understand. Because the past doesn't vanish just because we ignore it. It festers, and I think it's time we face it together. Hearing each other out may help more than we realize. The tension surged again, a tangible force crackling in the air. It was a moment of truth, both liberating and terrifying. Until now, they had merely danced around the tender points, masking grudges behind a facade of veiled sentiments. But this felt different. This was about tearing down walls, not just creating a connection, but rebuilding a lost understanding. As troubling thoughts flickered through Jake's mind, fear of retribution, of resentment, even of failure, he was driven by a sense of urgency, a need to mend what had long been broken. "All right," Aaron conceded slowly, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this then."
Jake's heart raced with a mixture of apprehension and exhilaration. What revelations lay ahead in this impending conversation, aching to be uncovered? Would they find clarity amid the chaos and reclaim ties that had long unraveled? Or would this confrontation yield new wounds? He felt the inevitable pull toward the truth, drawn into the depths of their history, where buried secrets waited to be unearthed. It was time to unearth the past, an act of necessary bravery. The stakes had never felt higher, and, just as Jake prepared for what lay ahead, a familiar specter in his mind questioned whether some ghosts were meant to remain unchallenged. All that remained now was the confrontation they had cautiously set in motion. Jake's breath hitched in his throat, the weight of Aaron's reluctant agreement settling like lead of his stomach. As he looked at his brother, he couldn't shake the image of the treehouse, an innocent fortress turned ruin in the wake of their fractured relationship. He found himself wrestling with the fragments of their shared history, each piece sharp and painful. "Let's just start with that day," Jake's voice faltered as he set the stage for what had felt like an inevitable reckoning, the fight that tore us apart. Aaron's posture shifted, his arms folding tightly across his chest. "You always seem to think that reliving it is going to change anything, Jake," he shot back, the defensive edge unmistakable. Jake clenched his jaw, suppressing an impulse to retreat. "I'm not trying to change it. I just want to understand why it happened, what went wrong, between us." The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with unspoken truths. Jake could feel his own heart racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins. This wasn't just about words. It was about peeling back layers of hurt that had appropriated their relationship for too long. "We were kids," Aaron spat, bitterness filtering through the nostalgia. "Kids with dreams and a whole future ahead of us. But dreams don't matter when everything crumbles."
"I know that," Jake replied, trying to temper the anger simmering just below the surface. "But all I remember is the chaos, the loud voices, the accusations. Do you remember what you said to Mom? What you said about me?" "This again?" Aaron snapped, his face contorting as if recalling the memory caused him physical pain. "It's important because it's what fractured us. We fell apart that day." Jake saw a flicker of something in Aaron's eyes, a glimmer of vulnerability, buried under layers of resistance. "I was angry," Aaron muttered, the fight draining out of him. "I felt abandoned after everything with Dad. You don't understand. You were the golden child." Jake's heart sank, the sting of old wounds echoing between them. "I didn't ask for that. I didn't know you felt that way. I just wanted you to be okay." "I was never okay," Aaron said, his voice barely audible. "I was scared. I didn't know how to deal with all of that, and you were always so good at shutting everyone out." The wall that had separated them for years, built on blame, regrets, and resentment, began to crack under this burgeoning realization. Jake inhaled a sharp breath. "I'm sorry if I made you feel alone, but it's not too late to reconnect, Aaron. We can rebuild. This is just a starting point." Aaron looked away, the tension in his shoulders beginning to release. "It's a long way back from where we are." "I know," Jake affirmed, his voice softer. "But I genuinely believe it's worth the fight. We can't change the past, but we can choose how to deal with it. Together." The silence that followed felt monumental, shadowed by the weight of their shared pain, but laced with a tentative hope. Jake could see the flicker of something in Aaron's eyes that felt like a bridge, a pathway leading them back to a bond that had felt irreparably broken. "Why is this so hard?" Aaron finally asked, the vulnerability in his tone unmasking years of repressed emotions. "Because it matters. And maybe," Jake hesitated, a rush of newfound courage galvanizing him, Maybe because it's the healing we both need. As they stood there, grappling with the enormity of their histories and desperate for a way forward, Jake felt a faint glimmer of possibility spark within him. Could they really move past this? Would they be able to redefine their relationship? Then a thought struck him, an uncharted territory they had never explored together. What if we made some ground rules for this conversation and the ones that follow? He suggested, both terrified and exhilarated by the prospect. Aaron seemed to mull it over, a mix of apprehension and interest crossing his features. You really think that'll make a difference? I think it's a start, Jake replied, determination pulsing through him. As they began to map out the contours of their conversation, a creeping urge settled in Jake's chest.
Perhaps this was more than just a call to address the past. It could be the foundation for something new, a chance to redefine themselves. But as he prepared to outline their parameters, a haunting question lingered at the edge of his mind. Were they ready to expose the deepest parts of themselves, or would fear drive them back into silence once again? Jake felt a surge of anxiety as he and Aaron began to craft their ground rules. Each word exchanged seemed like a carefully placed brick, attempting to reconstruct the wall they had both been so adept at throwing up between themselves. First, we need to actually listen to each other, Jake proposed, finding some confidence in the simplicity of the statement. No interruptions, just hear what the other is saying. Aaron nodded hesitantly. I can do that. And no accusations. This isn't about blaming each other anymore. It's about understanding. The heat of past emotions resonated in Jake's voice, a sharp contrast to the calmer demeanor he was striving for. They went back and forth, debating rules that felt both liberating and constricting. The tightness in the air morphed into a strange cocktail of fear and anticipation. Each rule felt monumental, and Jake could sense Aaron processing every suggestion, evaluating its implications. Can we also agree to keep this respectful? No name-calling, no shortcuts to digging at old wounds? Aaron's tone had shifted. He was starting to engage rather than resist. Yes, Jake exclaimed, grateful for Aaron's acknowledgement. They were building something tangible, even if they had not yet fully grasped its architectural significance. But doubt crept in. Would this really be enough? What if their past resurfaced like phantom pain, undermining every effort they made? They were wading into stormy waters after years of passive avoidance. And let's not just focus on what hurt us, Jake suggested cautiously. Let's talk about the good, too. What we used to enjoy, what we still have in common. That can help balance things out. Aaron tilted his head, a flicker of intrigue lighting his features. Maybe we could try something like that. It feels different. Jake's heart leapt. That was the breakthrough he had been searching for. Maybe shining a light on the good would help illuminate a path back to each other. But what if, Aaron hesitated, what if we find that the bad overpowers the good? The question plunged deep, piercing through Jake's optimistic facade. It spoke to a fear that had lingered in the corners of his mind. What if facing their reality only led to further resentment? Then we'll tackle it together, he said resolutely, even as the uncertainty draped over him like a heavy fog. It was a bold claim for someone who had spent so long skirting around issues rather than confronting them head-on. And yet, there was an exhilaration in it, the potential for growth, the risk of vulnerability. But also the haunting recognition of the stakes involved. If they failed, it wouldn't just be another fight. It could spiral irreparably into more years of bitterness. As they began to delve deeper into their histories, the tension coiling in Jake's stomach tightened again. What do we do if we reach a point where we feel overwhelmed? He asked, trying to prepare for the worst. Aaron thought for a moment. Then we take a break. We find a way to step back and process, but we must promise to return. The word promise hung in the room, heavy and fraught.
It felt precarious, yet it also heralded a new form of commitment, one that they had sorely neglected. "Okay," Jake murmured, feeling the weight of that promise bolster his resolve. "Let's commit to this together then." There was an earnestness in their exchange, a glimmer of hope breaking through the homogeneous darkness of their past. But as they stood on the precipice of this new chapter, Jake felt a sprinkling of fear edge back in. It was one thing to lay down their rules, another entirely to uphold them in the heat of emotional revelation. Would they be able to maintain respect and openness when the conversation stumbled onto the sharpest of their shared scars? The uncertainty loomed, yet it was matched by an electric thrill of finally doing something, anything, different. "Ready?" Aaron asked. Jake glanced at his brother, a mix of anticipation and dread swelling within him. "Let's see where this takes us." But as they began to plunge into the stories held behind their walls, Jake couldn't shake the thought that perhaps the hardest revelations were yet to come. What would they decide when faced with the most challenging truths of their relationship? And whom would they be on the other side? The conversation had reached a precipice where vulnerability met confrontation. Jake and Aaron sat across from each other, the rules they had established swirling in the air like an unsteady truce. Jake felt every pulse of trepidation in his chest, unsure of what lay ahead. "Let's address the day everything shattered," Jake started, his voice steady but quivering at the edges. The memories came rushing back, moments steeped in discord, anger, and unresolved feelings. "I want to understand what happened." Aaron's eyes narrowed, a shadow of uncertainty clouding his expression. "You know how we both felt back then. It wasn't just one day." "No, but that day defined us. I want to hear it from you, the friction that set everything ablaze." Jake's heart hammered, each beat echoing the fear of revisiting old pain. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of their shared past. "You were always the favorite, the one everyone thought would make it big," Aaron finally spat, bitterness coating his words. "I felt abandoned. I thought you didn't care about the family." "Well, maybe if I thought you felt that way, I would have fought harder to show you just how wrong you were."
Jake shot back, emotion clawing at his throat. For a few tense moments, the air crackled with unspoken wounds. But rather than retreat, Jake leaned into the tension. What if we stopped blaming each other? Can we see this from the other's perspective? Can we acknowledge how we both felt in that moment? Aaron blinked, taken aback. "You think it's that simple?" Jake, feeling layers peel away, pressed forward. "No, I don't think it's simple. I think it's necessary. You felt unseen because I was focused on what I thought I had to be, a success. But I felt alone too. I lost my father. I lost our family dynamic, and in it, I lost you." The truth hung between them, stark and tangible. Jake could see the flicker of understanding in Aaron's face, a bridge forming over the chasm they had created. "You always had it all together," Aaron replied, his tone quieter, stripped of the earlier aggression. "But you weren't perfect, were you?" A weight lifted from Jake's shoulders as he embraced his brother's admission. "No, I wasn't, and I'm not. I've hidden behind success because I believed it would salvage what was left of us, but it didn't. It only deepened our divide." "So what now? How do we change this?" Aaron's question cracked through layers of resentment, resting in a stillness laced with hope. Jake inhaled deeply. "We make a pact to be vulnerable, to open up about the things that scare us. You felt like I never needed you. I felt like I've lost everything. When I close myself off, it isolates us both." They shared a moment steeped in revelation, realizing this wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the future and what they were willing to build. "I want to let go of this anger," Aaron said slowly, as if testing the waters of honesty.
His tone had softened, revealing the wounds beneath his armor. "But it's hard, knowing the years we lost." Jake nodded, every word resonating with shared pain. "I want that too. Sometimes it takes dismantling the defensiveness to find common ground. But we have to be willing to speak our truths, no matter how uncomfortable." The air shifted, lighter yet laden with the weight of their reality. They could feel the bond tightening, stitching back the frayed ends of their relationship. "You know, if we're going to do this, we'll need to confront the moments that hurt us, not retreat like we always have," Aaron added, a new determination sparking in his eyes. "Yes," said Jake, heart racing with a mix of excitement and fear. Forging ahead means addressing the pain rather than letting it fester. In that moment, Jake felt a distinct shift within himself. His chest felt lighter, buoyed by clarity and intention. He glimpsed a path forward, not one layered with distrust, but one illuminated by vulnerability. Together, they could rewrite their narrative, not as brothers lost to ambition, but as allies navigating their family's complexities. As they continued dissecting their past, Jake and Aaron painted their stories with more colors than regret. They revisited moments of joy alongside shadows of sorrow, acknowledging the gravity of each without being consumed by them. With each honest admission, a new sense of camaraderie blossomed, reshaping their relationship before their eyes. When Jake spoke, he did so not just to bridge the gap between their hearts, but to remind himself of who he had the potential to be, a brother willing to fight. At the conclusion of their session, when silence fell again, it wasn't heavy, it was ripe with possibility. "What if we draw inspiration from our childhood?" Jake suggested softly. "Build the treehouse again, not as kids, but as men who aren't afraid to lean on each other." "That might be a fitting start," Aaron replied, his expression shifting into a burgeoning smile. Together, they had taken the crucial steps toward healing, rekindling the trust and warmth once shielded under layers of doubt and ambition. Jake's heart swelled with a sense of accomplishment, a profound realization dawning. He had reclaimed the brother he had thought lost and built capacities in himself that had long lain dormant. Jake had chosen vulnerability over fear, it proven to be his most potent weapon against the shadows of the past. As the conversation wove through familiar territory, they filled the void with newfound understanding and acceptance. And in doing so, Jake stepped into a life blossoming with potential, not as a man defined by wealth, but as a man committed to authentic connection. Real success wasn't determined solely by financial gain. It blossomed in the relationships we nurture along the way. And at that moment, Jake had decisively shifted his paradigm. With his brother beside him and a promise etched in their hearts, he made a silent vow to pursue this journey of self-discovery, with each step crafting a legacy that would thrive on trust and genuine connection. Today, Jake not only confronted the specter of his past, but also painted the first strokes of a vivid future, one where he would not shy away from vulnerability. With eyes set on what lay ahead, he had conquered the trepidation that had long clouded his judgment, emerging with solid confidence in his values and newfound recognition of his committed path. Now each moment felt like a reward, a testament to the power of embracing uncomfortable truths. And as he sensed that the door was just beginning to crack ajar, a weight lifted off his shoulders. The fragmented past was soon poised to transform into a source of growth and renewal. He smiled at Aaron, gratitude written all over his face. The journey wasn't finished, it merely began anew. Now he was ready to face the world not just as Jake the real estate agent, but as Jake the brother who stood committed to understanding and trust. And with that, Jake took a step forward. Not just into the future, but toward a deeper understanding of himself, and it was humbling. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.
You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.